Thank you for joining me. I am Elizabeth Wishler, and this is Hidden in Plain Sight. Today I explore how Jewish civilians in Eastern Europe survived Nazi occupation through fragile moment-to-moment forms of agency. Rather than focusing on armed resistance or organized underground movements, I look at everyday encounters that shaped whether civilians lived or died. Two testimonies anchor this work. Lubov Karlik from Tolchin and Hanna Kowarski from the Svintiany and Vilna region. Their accounts reveal how danger was interpreted through visibility, movement, and social cues, and how survival depended on rapid judgments made under coercion. This perspective helps us understand the Holocaust not only as a system of mass murder, but also as a lived environment where civilians constantly negotiated risk. Testimony shows that civilians understood danger through tone, pauses, and what people did or did not say. Survivors described threat as something they had to interpret constantly, often without reliable information or predictable rules. Local collaboration and help coexisted. Police, auxiliaries, and neighbors could decide life or death in a single encounter. A neighbor might shelter a child one day and denounce another family the next. Survival meant making decisions inside terror, where hiding, moving, or waiting carried immediate risk. This matters because it shifts our understanding of agency. It shows that everyday interpretation was central to survival, and that civilians lived inside systems where danger was social, not abstract. My research asks how Jewish civilians navigated visibility and concealment under occupation, and what their testimonies reveal about the limits of agency. I focused on everyday encounters in villages, forests, and small towns, because these spaces produce different forms of exposure and concealment. Local police and auxiliaries exercised discretionary violence. Neighbors could hide, feed, extort, or denounce Jews. My core claim is that agency existed, but within brutally narrow margins shaped by coercion. Survival depended on interpreting visibility, movement, and trust moment by moment. This approach also emphasizes contingency. Geography, timing, assistance, and chance encounters shaped what civilians could do, and often determined whether their choices were even possible. Violence was enforced socially. Patrols, denunciations, and opportunistic seizures shaped daily life. Survival meant interpreting people's behavior, not just German orders. Risk traveled through communities. Neighbors weighed aid versus betrayal under fear, greed, and retaliation. Rumors and crowd participation made Jews hypervisible, especially in places where civilians actively shaped persecution. Nazi rule depended on local police and auxiliary units. Their discretion made danger unpredictable, because enforcement varied from street to street and hour to hour. This created environments in which civilians had to constantly read social cues to avoid exposure. This timeline shows how danger escalated across 1941 and 1942. In 1941, the invasion and local auxiliaries gave police wide discretion. Crowd participation expanded, making Jews visible through rumor networks and public violence. By 1942, ghettos had tightened, and living outside them had become far riskier. The second wave of shootings intensified violence, especially through the Schutzmannschaft, which carried out mass killings in rural areas. A flight to the forests offered no guarantee of safety. Partisan anti-Semitism persisted, and some units expelled or killed Jewish civilians. After the war, Soviet silence shaped how survivors narrated their experiences, influencing what they felt able to say, and how they framed danger. My method is microhistorical. I read tone, pauses, and omissions as evidence of how civilians understood danger. Concrete details of movement and concealment show how constrained agency worked in practice. Secondary scholarship helps explain how collaboration, gendered violence, and partisan anti-Semitism shaped risk. My primary evidence comes from two testimonies, Lubov Karlik from Tolchin and Hanna Kowarski from the Svintiany and Vilna region. Their accounts track everyday encounters with police, neighbors, and armed groups. Together, these testimonies allow us to see how civilians interpreted danger in real time, and how survival emerged from the interplay of agency and contingency. Testimony is interpretive. Survivors narrate danger by arranging events into meaningful sequences. Tone shifts and emotional peaks show lived uncertainty. Silences can reflect fear, shame, or post-war norms. Reading testimony alongside occupation structures links personal choices to wider systems of violence. This approach helps us understand not only what happened, but how civilians made sense of danger while it was unfolding. Kowarski was 13. She judged danger through voices, distance, and men's body language. Adult escorts and armed groups became her information system. She lacked maps, news, and predictable rules. Her survival depended on rapid interpretation of forests, villages, and partisan zones. Small decisions about following, waiting, or approaching strangers carried high stakes. Her testimony shows how youth produced a distinct form of constrained agency, shaped by limited knowledge and dependence on adults. Karlik's testimony shows how rural landscapes shaped danger. Survival meant constant recalculation. Footsteps or voices could trigger immediate flight. Barns, attics, chimneys, and ditches offered temporary refuge. Open fields made bodies easy to spot. Forests offered cover but required navigating patrols and locals. Place defined how civilians understood exposure and concealment. These environments forced civilians to treat visibility as a shifting condition rather than a deliberate strategy. Gender shaped how civilians interpreted risk. Karlik describes forced undressing and sexualized humiliation. Her body became a visible target, shaping how she understood danger. Accepting food or shelter required reading men's intentions quickly. Women helpers often provided care, briefly expanding their options. Everyday decisions under male authority carried immediate risk. Gendered vulnerability shaped how women moved, where they hid, and whom they trusted. Collaboration was driven by fear, coercion, anti-Semitism, and material gain. Neighbors acted as gatekeepers. Their help ranged from food and hiding to extortion or denunciation. Survival meant reading tone, hesitation, and shifting rumors. Local police and auxiliaries decided outcomes on a case-by-case basis. Authority operated through patrols, stops, and selective enforcement. These dynamics show how civilians navigated environments in which danger emerged from social behavior rather than formal policy. Survival required constant choices about hiding, movement, and silence. Small actions mattered because any exposure could trigger arrest or killing. Reading people was strategic. Trust shifted quickly as helpers, neighbors, and police proved unpredictable. These micro-decisions show constrained agency, not passive endurance. Testimony reveals resistance as interpretive labor under structural violence. This expands our understanding of resistance beyond armed struggle, showing how civilians resisted by staying alive. Escape routes reproduced danger. Forests and villages could expose Jews to betrayal or violence again. Partisan units sometimes excluded, expelled, or killed Jews. Others exploited Jewish labor. Refuge could turn risky depending on commanders' moods and local rumors. Safety was conditional and unstable. These accounts show how even spaces imagined as protective could reproduce coercion and vulnerability. Survival was interpretive work. Danger was read through tone, pauses, and social cues. Collaboration operated as daily power. Neighbors' help, indifference, or betrayal shifted with fear and gain. Agency existed, but within limits shaped by terror, scarcity, and surveillance. Age and gender shaped exposure and vulnerability. These dynamics show how civilians continually recalibrated their interpretations of danger within rapidly changing environments. Agency appeared in microdecisions: hiding, moving, staying silent, judging cues. This lens links collaboration and resistance to everyday social power. Categories like helper, bystander, and collaborator were fluid. Even refuge spaces could reproduce danger. Survival was relational. Safety shifted with neighbors, police, guards, and armed groups. Help and betrayal could come from the same village network. These testimonies show how constrained agency operated inside structural violence and how civilians survived by interpreting danger in real time. My name is Elizabeth Wishler, and this has been Hidden in Plain Sight.